Media is, of course, big business, but unusually amongst industries, it's also an enormously powerful social and cultural force. To explore how that role is evolving, we've assembled a panel of people who are going to magically start coming up onto the stage now, who are involved in a wide variety of projects that use new media technologies to advance the human condition. Unfortunately, Nicholas Negroponte from the One Laptop Per Child project was unable to join us, but happily we are joined instead by Esther Dyson, who's just over there. She's one of the world's leading social and venture capitalists, and she's joining the panel in his place. Our guide for this event is Hassan Fatah. He's the editor-in-chief of The National here in Abu Dhabi, a former Middle East correspondent for the New York Times. He's also one of my bosses. As an Iraqi-American who grew up in California but now lives and works here in the Emirates, he's perfectly placed to chair the panel. Hassan.
Thanks so much. You're doing a good job. It's a pleasure to have you here, and it's such an honor to be with this tremendous panel, many of whom you will have heard of, and many of whom you will have been touched by in your lives. Everyone in this room has in some way a desire to change the world. Let's be honest. That's why we're all here, and we want to figure out how to do more. Whether it's connecting people, saving lives, creating jobs, even further. The next group of speakers probably can point directly to things they have been able to do to touch people's lives or change the world in ways large and small. They're here to talk about the social impact that media is having on our lives. Just to quickly introduce them, Naif Al-Mutawwa is founder of Tashkil Media. He's based in Kuwait. It's a company that's focused on creating children's media based on or infused with local culture. He's best known for creating the 99, the first group of superheroes born of an Islamic archetype. Outside of the show, you should ask him to make the pitch, which is always the brilliant thing. Marwan Jum'a is the Minister of Information and Communications Technology. He's previously Chief Executive Officer of, he's the Minister of Information and Communications Technology of Jordan, of the Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan. He's previously Chief Executive Officer of Express Telecommunications, one of Jordan's leading mobile operators. Josh Silverman is CEO of Skype. He's a serial entrepreneur who helped build companies like Shopping.com and Evite. And of course, Amreen Tareen is founder and CEO of AllVoices.com. It's a global people's media company where anyone can report news from anywhere in the world via cell phone or PC. And then finally, Esther Dyson is a former journalist. She's and commentator. She's on emerging digital technology, and just as important, as an investor and instigator and a philanthropist. You may best know her for her release 1.0 from the 1990s, as many of us remember her. But more importantly, she is currently focusing her career on preemptive healthcare and continues to invest in various types of technologies and businesses to change people's lives. I'd like to start with Josh Silverman, and to basically get a sense of how can Skype change people's lives?
Great, thank you very much, and thank you very much for inviting me to speak. Delighted to be here. Skype, just to talk for 1 second about what Skype is. Skype is a software company, not a telecommunications firm. We make only software. But it's software that converts any computing device into a communications device. Download Skype onto your PC, and you can talk for free with any other Skype user anywhere in the world. Today, there are over 500 million people using Skype, 500 million registered users of Skype, and we're adding over 300,000 new registered users each day. Last year, Telegeography said Skype accounted for about 12% of the world's international calling volume. And what we find especially exciting is the emergence of video calling on Skype. Over a third of all Skype calls are now video calls. And if you think about that, that means that about 4% of the world's international calling volume is now Skype video calls. Verizon is the world's largest international telco, and they do about 4% of the world's international calling volume. That means there's more Skype video calls happening than there are international voice calls in the world today. So it's been an amazing emergence of video calling on Skype. What I find so exciting about video calling is its ability to really shift the concept of being present somewhere. So, as a personal example, for Christmas dinner this year, my family had two members join us, one from Switzerland and one from New York, via Skype video. And we hear stories over and over from our user community of how people are using Skype to be present in other places, which brings us to some of the social mission that we fulfill at Skype. Let me start with some of the economic social mission, and I think particularly in a place like the Emirates, it's appropriate. In today's world, we've become far more global, where you have immigrant communities everywhere, and it becomes much more possible to be an immigrant community when you maintain the ability to stay connected to your family far flung. But businesses more and more are also now starting in a multi-office situation. Skype's a relatively small company and has 8 offices. From its earliest days when Skype had only a few employees, we started with 3 offices. And I hear from small businesses all over the world that they couldn't have got their business off the ground were it not for Skype. We've got, 5 people in Jordan, we've got 8 developers in Poland, and we've got, a small sales office in New York, and we're all connected via Skype. There's also an enormous number of nonprofits and NGOs that are using Skype. So, for example, I found out that there are peacekeepers that are using Skype for training across Africa. And again, because we're a software technology that can be used by many people in many ways, we're not always aware of all of the ways that people use us. There's a lot of distance learning that's happening via Skype. So a teacher in Brooklyn reached out to us to talk about how her class has a regular Skype video call with some underprivileged kids in Brazil. So an underprivileged kid in group of kids in Brooklyn and an underprivileged group of kids in Rio can talk to each other and get a sense of what life is like around the world. A young girl who is in the hospital for 7 months and is able to finish her studies from her hospital bed via Skype. Telemedicine that's happening, so doctors are actually able to use their skills by supporting a less skilled medical professional thousands of miles away. These are all things that happen every day with people using standard off-the-shelf Skype software. But our off-the-shelf software isn't always enough. So the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugee reached out to us recently and spoke to us about how they have several thousand staff working in refugee camps around the world. And I found this very moving. My team found this very moving. These are people who leave their families and children behind for 6 to 12 months to go work in some of the worst places on earth, and go for 6 months, perhaps, without the opportunity to talk with the children that they've left behind unless they're willing to spend $5 a minute for a satellite phone. In the camp environment, there's one satellite uplink which needs to support the entire needs of the camp, including communications, and there simply wasn't bandwidth for the staff. So we've worked to develop a version of our software which actually enables the staff to communicate with their family back home for free. For me, I think of this a bit as our Formula One project. If we can make Skype work in a refugee camp deep in the desert on a satellite with high latency, we're going to do wonders for you with your decent broadband connection at home. So we're very excited to be supporting the UNHCR and rolling that out.
Thanks very much. Esther Dyson, you say you're an instigator. How do you instigate change, and what are you up to?
Okay, what I instigate is people to start companies, and it will vary. I was just delighted. One of my companies is a company called CVO, which is an online recruiter company that started in Hungary. And just as you said, our sales manager used Skype and Skype video. She was on all day with salespeople all over Central and Eastern Europe. And this is a completely commercially minded company, but what we did was we helped create labor market mobility in Central and Eastern Europe, where it was an emerging market that had no history of entrepreneurship, no history of salesmanship, no commercial instincts. And so in the context of Central and Eastern Europe, this was, if you like, a social company. What I'm doing now is, again, trying to empower individuals. They need to be empowered in different ways in different places. In the United States, I'm on the board of 23andMe, which gives genetic information about themselves to consumers. And it's a nice commercial company. Just, if I don't mention this, people will think I left it out. It was founded by the wife of Sergey Brin, who's the co-founder of Google. And we give people, not just, Google gives people information about the outside world. We give people information about the inside world. In several states in the United States, it's illegal to do that without a doctor. And we don't break the law, but we are certainly agitating against it. In other markets, I've got two interesting companies, both of which use text rather than the internet. The idea is, if you really want to reach the broadest population, if you want to reach people who don't have very much, cell phones are a much better way to do that than the internet. One is called Text for Baby. This is not a company, it's actually a project started by a company called Voxiva, where I sit on the board. It's a very simple idea. You're a woman, you find out you're pregnant, you text for baby in this case, but you can implement it in many other ways, to a particular number. It starts asking you questions: how much do you weigh, when is the baby due, signs you up, and then every week you exchange text messages reporting, did you gain weight, how much is the baby kicking? Are you remembering not to drink and smoke, et cetera, et cetera. And as long as the answers are within some kind of scope, it just continues to lead you along in your pregnancy. If your answers aren't in scope, if you are not gaining weight, if the baby isn't kicking when it should be, it will refer you to a clinic, and so forth and so on. This is now being implemented in the US. I'm trying to make it happen in Russia and in India, where I was last week. I would love to see not the US company make it happen all over the world. I want to see people within all these other countries make it happen within their countries. The second one, and then we can talk about this later, the second one is called Text Eagle. This is the idea of using cell phones as a way of distributing work. So if you have a small task like translating a few snippets of text, and of course you can do this over and over again, you can now find millions of people all around the world who have cell phones and have very little else, who don't live in big labor markets, but who can perform these tasks for you. They can tag photos, they can translate, they can do all kinds of lightweight intellectual tasks. This company started in Nairobi, Kenya, and our biggest challenge is not finding workers. There are lots of people who are willing to work. Our challenge is finding tasks that can be properly parallelized, and that's what we're working on now. So again, you have this low-end, very simple technology that acts not simply as a means for distribution of information or entertainment, but also as capital equipment. Sewing machines mean a huge amount to lots of women in Asia and in Africa. This is a sewing machine for the mind.
Naif al-Mutawwa, how is the 99 changing the world?
In 2 seconds or less, right?
In 2 seconds or less.
For me, the challenge has been about perception. Perception is what drives every decision we make. And as a psychologist, I was becoming more and more alarmed, I'm also the father of five little boys, that the way Islam is being seen, not just by non-Muslims, but by Muslims themselves, was alarming. I gave a recent lecture at the medical school in Kuwait where I asked students to read an article for me, but I had left out the names of the reporter, the name of where the incident took place, and the article boiled down to the following. A group called the Party of God had banned Valentine's Day, had banned the color red, and had threatened that any boy and girl caught flirting would be taken off immediately to get married. And when I asked the students where this took place, they all said Saudi Arabia. And in fact, what blew their mind was that it actually took place in India. That it was not Islam. It was a right-wing Hindu group. But what broke my heart is that in the article, which was actually in the New York Times, The people interviewed there called that behavior Talibanization. In other words, this is Muslim thinking coming into Hinduism. Whereas my students said, it's us. Right? So this idea of kind of identifying self and other. And so the challenge for me after 9/11 was, for whatever millions of theories out there as to what really happened 9/11, the important thing for me was that Islam, the way I want to define for my own children, was being taken down. And when things go that crazy in the world, they say, sounds like a job for Superman in the West. Well, there was no Superman. And so I went about and created something called the 99, which are superheroes based on Islamic archetypes without getting into religion. And I grew that from a comic book series out of Kuwait. It's out in 8 languages now. We're in China, we're in India, we're in Indonesia, we're in Turkey. We launched a theme park in Kuwait a year ago. The second one hopefully will be in Oman within a year. We'll be announcing in a couple of weeks that we actually have cracked the US market as an animation series. We've done a deal with Endemol a year and a half ago. Endemol, the people behind Star Academy and Big Brother. 26 episodes have been written in Hollywood by the writers behind Spider-Man and Ben 10. The pre and post production is in the UK, and according to Endemol, this is at a level that even surpasses Star Wars Clone Wars. This is going to set the bar on television animation production, and it's in the US market. Hopefully by fall, we'll be announcing that in a couple of weeks as to who the broadcasters, etc. And we did a fun deal last summer where we announced that to commemorate President Obama reaching out to the Muslim world, that this year DC Comics will be publishing a global series where Batman, Superman, and Wonder Woman will be reaching out to the 99 to have that conversation that has never been had before between democratically selected, albeit not elected, but selected cultural icons. And so my work from the beginning has been, how do I solve this problem? Other people have gone into Islam and pulled very negative symbols through which to associate things that I don't want for my own children. And so I went back to the same source and pulled out positive ones. And just on a note is, when I give my talks, typically in the West, I ask the crowd, how many of you have read The Catcher in the Rye? And typically hands go up, a lot of them hands go up. And then I ask a follow-on question, how many of you have killed in the name of that book? Mm-hmm. To which there's always laughter. And when the laughter subsides, I say, well, you laugh. But 30 years ago, Mark David Chapman gunned down John Lennon with a copy of that book in his hand. And he told police during the interrogation that it was the book that drove him to kill. A year later, Hinckley tried to kill President Ronald Reagan. He too referred to the same book. And I leave them with a question. So whose fault is that? Is it the book or the deranged lunatic that pulled out their own personal private messages? Thank you.
Amr Tareen, there's a similar theme in your work. Give us a sense of how you started out and how it's going.
Okay. Actually, my name is Khan, and I'm not a terrorist. So Tareen is a sub-tribe of Khan. And the reason I started All Voices was I am based out of Silicon Valley. I was a venture capitalist. I gave birth to 2 sons, and I'm raising them as Muslims in America. And what I found was that mainstream media was very biased, and it portrayed people in a certain manner. So what I wanted to do was to start a global media company where people share what their perspectives and news, regardless of where they were on the planet, and using cell phones and computers. And at that time, social media was taking off. So I wanted to create a community of people, regardless of where they were based, to connect around news and events. And to me, location was very key. I wanted a person in Iraq to talk to someone in the United States around news and events, because the whole idea of forums were that you had to create something and then people would come and go. But news was such that it was always being generated at some part of the world, and then people could come and aggregate around it and share their views and opinion and actually add content and get to know each other. That's the purpose around All Voices. We are a technology and bottoms-up social media company where people report news, they rate news, they share, they do fact-checking, and the technology actually creates these city pages for over 100,000 cities in the world and ranks based on how the community is reacting to news, what's happening on the internet, from city to a country page to a region page to a global page. The company was launched in July of 2008. We have over 300,000 citizen reporters from around the world representing 160 countries, and we have over 4.5 million unique visitors a month as of January of this year. So my goal is to make it a people's media company around news and events where you share and you can build context around why a certain person has certain opinions and how they report news based on their location. So underlying technology is geolocation, matching of articles and content together, even from mainstream media, bloggers, as well as citizen reporting all around the world.
Marwan Juma, you're flanked by people who technically will rub up against you, will sort of poke you, will make life difficult for you as a minister of government. How does government engage with this? How does government play a positive role in this, in helping them affect this change?
Sabah al-khair, good morning everyone. Let me start by saying in Arabic, and Rahim Allah amrain arifa qadra nafsa. May God have mercy on the souls of those who know their limitations. So I don't claim to be an expert when it comes to media, but I'm not an expert in government either. I just joined government 3 months ago, so be nice to me. So be nice. I've been in the private sector for 20 years, so this is new to me. But Jordan is a feel-good story in the region, I think. Some of you who know Jordan doesn't have any natural resources. The only resource we have is people, and we have some of the troublemakers here with us here from Jordan as well. Some of the best stories that come out of Jordan in terms of content, online content, has come out of Jordan. We know the story of Maktoub, Samih Toqan, who was bought out by Yahoo. Stories of Jiran, the biggest Arab online community, Shufi TV, the region's biggest TV guide, where the content is being done by local women from rural areas in Jordan, which is very important. Kharabish, one of the top interactive and creative content on the web. And this is where Jordan has, in little less than 10 years, revenues have gone up from 300 million to 2.5 billion in about 10 years. And we contribute today to about 10% of the country's GDP comes from this ICT sector. But what I'm trying to do as a government, is to ensure that, and just to give you some figures about the Arab world for those of you who are unaware, over the coming 10 years, we have to create over 100 million jobs in the Arab world. So when we talk about us being a young population, demographics, being an opportunity, it's also a challenge if you don't play our cards right. It could be a serious challenge. And we have to create the jobs that you need for the 21st century. And we have to realize today we are living in a knowledge economy, so we have to ensure that jobs of tomorrow meet the demands of today's private sector. My role basically is to ensure that telecom and ICT becomes an enabler and not a divider. How do we make sure that the average Jordanian and the less affluent Jordanian has access to technology and has access to the best resources? Because the beauty of IT, all you need is brain power, good education, and access to knowledge. So no one should be given a monopoly when it comes to this area. The beauty of the people I named here today, none of them were born with a silver spoon in their mouths. They all suffered for years. Samir, for about 10 years, suffered and worked hard, and he came up slowly. And as typical young Jordanian who couldn't make ends meet, but he persisted for 10 years till at the end of the day, the opportunity came. And the same thing for Jiran and for Ammar Qudsi and for Amjad Tadrus, who are working their way up slowly, but believe given the chance they can have hope. One thing we're trying to focus on in Jordan is also the issue of education. While we say the opportunity is global for IT because it's about exports, so is the challenge. So we have to compete not at a regional scale, we have to compete with the best in the world. So we have to ensure in terms of education, we don't only graduate numbers, but also the quality of education has to be really top when it comes to standards. One thing we're doing also in Jordan, not as government, and my previous life in private sector as well, there has been a gap in our part of the world when it comes to entrepreneurship. Actually, it doesn't exist in our part of the world. The only entrepreneurship you have basically in people investing in real estate, if I'm maybe a bit controversial. Basically, if you go to your parents to invest in ICT, the typical answer, and for those of you who heard His Majesty King Abdullah's Davos session, and the Arab world, you have and this is when he's, anytime you go to someone for an investment, the immediate reaction is you get no. I mean, in our nature, we're very negative as people. So when it comes to entrepreneurship, it's unheard of, it's unfounded.
Don't worry, most venture capitalists, 95% of the time say no to you.
Yeah. But there's that 5% though.
Here in the Gulf, they don't say no, they just smile. They just come back next week.
The idea is we're creating the mechanism where for entrepreneurs to come in, those who require $10,000, $20,000, $30,000, the real startups. We're creating the mechanism where we're going to weed out people with good business plans, then those with plans that make some sense, to mentor them, to train them, to build their capacity, a real hardcore boot camp where over a 5-6 month period, we can graduate companies that hopefully become the maktoubs, the next maktoubs of the Arab world. The idea is not only to create deal flow and we create opportunities, it's about changing the culture in the Arab world. And we need that, because at the end of the day, if we don't have more entrepreneurs, we don't have more thinkers, more challengers, we will have a hard time down the line. And this is where in our part of the world we're using IT in education and I always say the saying, for those of you who heard that saying before, I apologize if I'm boring you, but Confucius said, if you tell me, I would forget. If you show me, I would remember. If you involve me, I would understand. And this is where when you use IT in education as a tool, interactive, and I've seen kids, they understand what you're doing. Once you understand, you become a thinker, you become a challenger, and then eventually you can become an entrepreneur. And that's what we have to focus on in the Arab world. It is, at the end of the day, it's all about education. It's about creating equal opportunity for everyone, because everyone should have the right to participate in this very important endeavor. And it's about hope. At the end of the day, we've created over 18,000 jobs over the past 10 years, about 50,000 jobs indirect. So the new middle class emerging in our part of the world is coming out of ICT. And this, I think, is a story of a country. And and if I may say, that gets it, that knows what it takes, but also realizes we have serious, serious challenges down the line as well.
There's a common theme in a lot of this discussion, which is there is a profit motive. Do you feel, I mean, I'll open it to any of you, do you feel that there should be a profit motive in making change? And what works best? We're so used to thinking about aid groups, providing aid and help and that sort of thing. But you're talking about something very, very different. Esther?
I think generally, first of all, it's not either or, and the answer isn't always the same. It's what works. But I always remember talking to some guy in Russia back in 1991, and he said, this is the truth, it's maybe not politically correct, but he said, you know, we don't really like the Germans because they come here and they say they're going to help us. But the American businessmen, they come in and they want to do business with us, and that's what we like. We want to be respected. We don't want charity. We want someone to invest in us because they believe that we are worth investing in. And that's my general feeling. If something needs funding all the time, probably there aren't enough people who want it, or they would pay for it. Now, this doesn't resonate too well with the content issue, which we discussed yesterday. And there, I think, actually, philanthropy might make sense. But by and large, I want to do things that people value, that they will pay for. And I want to respect people enough to think that they will.
Amra, we haven't heard. I mean, do you feel a profit motive is important?
Absolutely. I do believe profit motive is very important. You need to create companies that are sustainable, and having a profit motive is what makes companies sustainable. So to give you an example, All Voices has numerous competitors, including a company called Now Public, which was venture funded, which was acquired last year. There's other companies that are similar in citizen media, which just use the power of people, and they have editors, they have people who actually aggregate blogs manually, like Global Voices, which is a nonprofit. All Voices is based on a very different model. The model is get more engagement of the users. The more engagement the user has, the more page views they get. The more page views they get, the more ads you can serve them, even if they're low CPM ads. When I mean from CPM, I mean cost per 1,000 impression. So the goal is to have a platform that scales by technology and community. And if you can do that, you can actually make money. And that's what the model of All Voices, which is venture funded. But there are different models, and I think it has to do a lot with the founder of who founds the company, what model they're used to.
If I may, this is a question coming out lately. Is it about, of course it's about making money. Let's all be honest at the end of the day. Of course it's about profits, but you cannot be driven by profits. It's a given. You have to maximize shareholder wealth. You have to make money. This is capitalism. But this cannot be your raison d'etre. This cannot be the reason why you go to work. And that's why companies have missions. I mean, for example, Google, organizing the world's information.
Absolutely.
You had Apple saying, changing lives one person at a time. But at the end of the day, it's about making money. Yes, it's a given. So it's not either or. Is it about making money or about your mission statement? At the end of the day, everything's about making money. But it cannot be about the reason why you go to work.
And
your raison d'etre as a company has to be beyond that, and which is the case in every company, I think, whether it's in
And that's why there's
Skype.
this whole trend of social entrepreneurship. It's not that you are an entrepreneur just to make money. Yes, you should have profit as a motive, but you should also do good. Because I think the companies in the long term that are sustainable are the ones that have a social mission.
But as a minister, sorry, if you...
You going to switch the question?
no, I was just going to follow up.
No.
As a minister of government, in many ways, many entrepreneurs would see government as sort of a stumbling block along the way. So how would you, in discussing the profit motive and discussing all of that, how, especially in this region where we, in many ways there's a regulatory aspect and many regulations are essentially in another age. How do we move things forward and how do we encourage that profit motive?
I think we can, as governments, we can move things forward by staying out of the way. If you take a look at for example, Bluetooth, just as an example, and the use of Bluetooth as a means of communication and as a linkage means over the past 5 years and the amount of growth we've seen, it is because it is unregulated. When governments don't get in the way, things move forward. The role of government has to be to create the environment to facilitate and move out. So, and when you have the right laws, and this is why we're taking our time in Jordan in the new telecom law to ensure that we take into account convergence of media and telecom, which is a very complex issue. And we try and learn from the best. But the more government gets out of the way, and we ensure that we just facilitate, we create the environment for the private sector to thrive and stay out of the way. And that's why government in Jordan, we're divesting all investments that were previously made by government in existing companies in Jordan. And and we're also separating the role of policy from regulation. We set policy in terms of government, but we also have regulators to regulate. But the more we move away from regulation into facilitation and staying out of the way, the more you will have private sector thriving, I think, and that's an important point.
And for you, you're sending published material around the world across borders and that sort of thing. You often find yourself, especially as somebody who's trying to push the boundaries of comfort, you find yourself in a position of rubbing up against the government and how to move forward. How do you get past the challenge?
First of all, do you spell profit with a PH or an F when you're asking if it's for profit? Government for us, we had a couple of challenges, but we just kind of stayed the course. We just kind of, we told them what we were doing, we told them again, we kept telling them, and every time there was an update or some kind of result that we wanted to share. I'll give you an example. In Kuwait, I had a little incident where our license was taken away for a few months, and I basically said, okay, I'm going to get the license in the Emirates. It's that simple, because I'm not going to miss a beat in terms of business. It's not going to hurt me, it's going to hurt you, because I'll now be an Emirati magazine versus a Kuwaiti magazine. And guess what? I got the license back. So that's how kind of we've been dealing with it. But on the larger issue of profit, the company is important, but also the motive of the entrepreneur is very important. I know for me, I wanted this to be a for-profit company because I wasn't doing this just to get a salary, and I wasn't doing this for me. I didn't want to do this without support. And the only real way to gauge support and kind of force the boundaries of how you're running the company is to see if there's a place for it in the market. I didn't want to find out 20 years later, 30 years later that it really didn't have an impact. And so I felt the only real measurable way was to have it be for profit.
We have about 5 minutes left for Q&As, but Amra, go ahead until we get the microphone moving around.
Okay. So just to give you another example. Oh, okay. You want me to talk?
Please, go ahead.
So to hire the best talent, I also believe you have to be a company for profit. And All Voices has a technology background, so I have to hire real engineers who know how to do matching and clustering and news clustering. And that requires hiring real talent in Silicon Valley. And if you were a nonprofit, you wouldn't be able to hire those people.
And I just want to say one more thing about mission. You don't need to be, quote, a social company to have a social mission. You can be a restaurant and you can give your extra food to the poor. You can be Twitter and you can give your extra bandwidth to people who need it for social purposes. You can be a hotel. I live in downtown New York. After 9/11, the local hotels opened up and gave coffee and food to the firefighters. Whatever you do, that's your mission, and you can apply it for profit and for good.
There's a question in the room.
A couple questions for the speakers.
Please introduce yourself.
My name is Lara Satrakian from ABC News. And to Josh, I wonder, how do you feel about the fact that Skype is blocked here and in other states across the region? Are you looking or even working to change that? And also, as a growing software company, where do you see growing revenues? Is it Skype out, or is it something else, maybe something we haven't heard about before? You're Dr. Al-Matawa. We've watched the 99 grow. We've seen some pushback in the name of Islam, even as you try to create new impressions of Islam. Do you ever feel unsafe? Is there a sense, why do you think it is your work provokes that reaction?
Great.
Go ahead, Josh.
Happy to go first. Yeah, I think it's quite disappointing that in the Emirates, the official policy is to not allow Skype. It's one of the very few countries on earth that adopts a policy against Skype. And I think, you know, what you will find in the history of economics is when a government acts to protect a legacy profit pool, it is rarely in the best interest of the economy or the people. So I think there's a number of reasons why that's not in the best interest of the Emirates or the people who live here. One of the goals should be to drive broadband penetration. And Skype and technologies like Skype help you to get more value out of the broadband access that you're already paying for. Two, it promotes economic development as a country that's got a great amount of trade, international trade. One of the things your business people are looking to do is connect with other business people around the world, and Skype is a vital technology, more and more an essential technology for small business people to communicate and interact. And third, when you're trying to attract a large immigrant population and support an emigrant population, Skype is really a vital tool that allows people from all around the world who have left behind family to come and support them working in another economy. It's really quite an essential way for people to stay connected. So I personally feel it's quite short-sighted of the government. We are always open to discussions and would love to engage more broadly in how we can do that. But I think the broader answer is that you know, looking to protect the legacy profit pool is generally not in the best interest of the people or the economy.
Naif.
When a foreign body's if foreign objects introduce the body, the white blood cells all rush, whether it's good for you or it's bad for you. They come in, they try to destroy it. That's how your body's set up. Your mind's set up the same way. When new idea comes about, you try to fit it into a box, and if there's no box, typically you try to put a coffin, right? You try to bury it. And so I knew that going into this. I knew I'd get pushback, but I accepted that. I mean, that was initially, you know, I tell my investors now, the only person crazier than me is you. That you actually gave me the money to try to pull this off. And you know, one story that resonates with my mind, it was in Indonesia. I was actually taken to a place that had pictures of probably the CIA's most wanted up on the wall, but as heroes on magazine covers, and I was asked to do an interview there, and I was scared. The filmmaker was following me with a camera. It was a film that's going to be on PBS soon called Wham Bam Islam. He's Jewish. They asked him his religion. He dropped the tribe like that. He said Christian. He felt unsafe. And so they brought 3 guys in to challenge me, and these guys were looking to put me in my place, right? And so they spoke better Arabic than I ever will, even though they grew up in Indonesia and I grew up in Kuwait. And they started off, you know, I gave them the opportunity. And I said to them, I said, I remember growing up, you know, I was taught that, you know, God created the sky, the heavens, was it 4 levels, 5 levels, knowing the answer was 7. So one of them said 7, and thought this is going to be easy, they're going to get him, right? So this guy threw out an ayah, this guy threw out a hadith. And so I sat back and I smiled and I said, guys, you can have the 7th level all to yourself. Let the rest of us compete for the other 6. You know? So it's been a process of kind of perception and rewording and reframing and reworking and kind of not allowing others to set the language and the tone, but trying to set it myself. And that's how I've been able to kind of navigate that fine line. Plus, getting an investment from an Islamic investment bank didn't hurt.
Unfortunately, we actually have no more time for any questions. We're just out of time. they're going to cut my neck here if I don't end it. But I would like to thank our panel. I would encourage you to just come up to them separately now and just ask your questions. Thank you very much there. And I'm trying to remember what the next session is, but thank you all very much.